Hi there, friends. Chaplain Bell here with a video devotion from Isaiah chapter 55, verses 1 through 5.
Come, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters, and he who has no money, come buy and eat. Come, buy wine and milk without money and without price. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which does not satisfy? Listen diligently to me, and eat what is good, and delight yourselves in rich food. Incline your ear and come to me. Hear that your soul may live, and I will make with you an everlasting covenant, my steadfast, sure love for David. Behold, I made him a witness to the peoples, a leader and commander for the peoples. Behold, you shall call a nation that you do not know, and a nation that did not know you shall run to you, because of the Lord your God and of the Holy One of Israel, for he has glorified you.
As you hear these verses, what do you think is most important to you? I would say that most people say that food, shelter, clothing, security, things along those lines are very important. And yet, when people have these things, how often do they think about them? Not that often. It's only when these essentials for life are taken away that we begin to really miss them. For example, how often do you think about air? But get in a pool and try and swim an entire lap underwater, and suddenly you are thinking very strongly and fondly about another breath of air. One poem that illustrates this idea of taking things for granted is a poem by Shel Silverstein called The Clockman. You can find it in the book Where the Sidewalk Ends. It goes like this. How much would you pay for an extra day? The clockman asked the child. Not 1 penny, the answer came, for my days are as many as smiles. How much would you pay for an extra day? He asked when the child was grown. Maybe $1, or maybe less, for I have plenty of days of my own. How much would you pay for an extra day? He asked when the time came to die. All the pearls and all the seas, and all the stars in the sky. Like the man in the poem, for many people, circumstances can greatly impact priorities. So also with Israel in our text from Isaiah 55. They had this massive powerhouse of a nation just to their north called Assyria. And this country was a gigantic threat to them. They were like this close to being conquered, and they were looking for any chance from anywhere, any hope that they could be saved. Unfortunately, they were not turning to the person who had given them their promised land in the first place, the Lord their God. They were looking at false gods. They were looking at their old captors, Egypt, for support. They were looking everywhere. And isn't that the case with us too today? That sometimes we will often prioritize the gifts of God over our relationship with God itself? Maybe it's a little hard for us to understand Israel's predicament back in the day as Americans, just because, look, we have these two massive bodies of water to our eastern and western shores that are huge strategic barriers. And then to north and south, we have Canada and Mexico. We don't have a very aggressive set of neighbors. But go to the other side of the world and imagine like pre-World War II France with Germany just right there, and thinking, oh man, how are we going to deal with this? That's kind of how Israel was feeling at the time. They were like, man, this is a serious threat. Like Lord, I'm sorry, you're great, you gave us this promised land, but that's a real threat right there, and I don't know how I'm going to deal with that. How often is it that we today will prioritize the gifts of God over God himself? How many times when we are threatened by, losing some of these essentials, security, shelter, prosperity, that we will just turn completely away from God and give all of our time, all of our money to pursuing the gifts of God. That is exactly what Israel was doing at their time, and that is what we are tempted to do today. The problem with forgetting God in pursuing the gifts of God is that we forget the greatest gift that God has given us, and that is himself. God gave us his own Son, Jesus Christ, who for us men, for us women, for all humanity, came down from heaven, took on human flesh, and died on a cross for all of our sins, in order to give you that bread which always satisfies, to give you that richest of fare, as God talks about in Isaiah 55, that everlasting covenant. All those essentials that we were talking about that we all can't live without, food, security, shelter, God gives us that forever through his Son Jesus. And that is what we risk losing when we turn our backs on God to pursue the gifts of God. And so, let us not be like the Israelites in Isaiah 55. Let us instead turn to Jesus and turn to the eternal gifts that he gives us in salvation and life. God be with you all. Chaplain Bell, signing out.